Okay, so now we know what to do during the exam itself, but that's not enough. I think it's also important to talk about a few things you should avoid doing on your exam. Bear in mind that this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are plenty of things which are probably not a very good idea to do on your final exam, but still, let's go over some typical mistakes and some things which some of the students typically do, which don't necessarily contribute to a very good grade. I think first, and the one which we see most often on that list, is inventing new facts. So very often you will receive facts of the case, and students will start discussing facts which just never occurred. They will invent their own facts. What would have happened if that woman did not cross the street, or what would have happened if consent was gathered prior to deployment of a cookie on a website. I'm very bad at improvising facts, as you can see. But the main point is basically the same. You should not start inventing alternative facts on your exam, because that is not going to contribute to the actual discussion which you're having. It can do that, but in a very limited amount of circumstances, in a very limited set of circumstances where you're usually discussing some broader legal standards. And again, in a majority of cases, it is a bad idea because you're de facto writing a new exam question, right? If I ask you, are these goods sold for personal use? If the CEO ordered this set of shoes for their own personal use, and you say, but what would have happened if they ordered horses, or what would have happened if they were using the shoes professionally? I think that usually you want to keep discussion of the facts which have not occurred to a bare minimum. Secondly, you should not be drawing any conclusions which are not backed by the analysis. And I know that this is basically what I've been saying over and over in all of these videos. Analyze, analyze, analyze. But in other words, just remember to give proper reasoning for any arguments which you're making. Reasoning which is deeply grounded in both the facts of the case as well as the applicable law. Now, this might sound again as a very straightforward thing. I've said this many times, but it's very easily forgotten too. So make sure not to have any unsubstantiated conclusions on your exam, or any arguments which you cannot substantiate, which do require some level, at least, of analysis. You should also, another thing you should think about is prioritizing. So you should prioritize those parts of your exam which are most important. How are you going to know what's most important? Well, based on your substantive knowledge of the law. So if you see that a certain problem is very challenging in a particular case, then write more about that than something which is not entirely problematic. In our example in previous video, we saw that you didn't really need to use too much time to explain that there is a contract. You should have maybe prioritized explaining that some goods were used for personal use. So just think, what's a bigger issue? It's tricky, though, because you will want to write more about issues that you feel comfortable writing about, and those are not necessarily the issues that you are that are most pertinent in a particular case. Again, use your common sense. Imagine that the advice which you're writing is, the solution to the exam problem which you're writing is the advice you would be paying a lawyer for. So if you went to a divorce lawyer, but they actually really just specialized in inheritance, you would not want to be paying them to focus on this like one minor aspect of the whole proceedings and to write memo upon memo on something which is not really what you're interested in. So just remember, prioritize based on your knowledge of the law. And on some legal exams, you're going to actually receive percentage points. You will see how much each separate exam question is weighted on the final exam, and how much it contributes to your global score. So obviously, prioritize things which have more points. You should also not be using your time on anything which is not contained in the questions, which is not directly relevant for the questions which are asked. I know you will say, obvious, This is obvious enough. I'm not going to be using time on my exam to write about things which are not exam related. And you would be surprised how many times I've seen students use time on a 4-hour exam to write something along the lines of, oh, I thought that this exam question was very difficult. There are other fora for you to take up those discussions and to give feedback on the structure or the fairness of the exam question. Now is not the time. So only write about things which are directly relevant for the questions which are being asked. Do not go into political discussions unless the exam calls for going into the political discussions. Do not go into deep theoretical reflections unless the exam calls for deep theoretical reflections. But you see my point here. You might want to show off some of your knowledge about the broader aspects of the law, which is not directly relevant to the case. Only do that if you have extra time left, and you usually will not have extra time left. But generally, please avoid writing about irrelevant things. Why is this important, and why is that such a critical part of your grade? Well, again, take the simple lawyer test. Would you be paying a lawyer, to help you draft a contract, and this lawyer would instead just focus on your divorce proceedings? So these things are, I know that the examples I'm coming up with are nonsensical, but I'm trying not to script these videos entirely. So you get my point. Basically, you don't want to be paying a lawyer for entirely irrelevant work. So those things are important. It's also important not to plagiarize. Each institution, including us at BI, has its own policies on academic honesty, and you need to know those rules before you start writing your exams. You should know what's expected of you when it comes to referencing, what type of referencing style, and you want to be able to refer to sources in a way which gives due credit to those sources. When in doubt, just use common sense. Was this idea mine, or did I find out about it someplace else? If you found out about it someplace else, put a short reference. It might be too time-consuming to format your references properly. You can leave that for the end of the exam, but make sure to insert a reference when referring to someone else's idea, just to be on the safe side of the rules on academic integrity and honesty. Again, those rules are created in order to foster your learning and in order to basically create a sense of professionalism and to promote your understanding of what it's like to operate in a professional setting. And then, perhaps most crucially, above everything else, do not panic. Your enemy number one on any given exam is going to be panic. You want to do everything you can to reduce your stress level. You want to do everything in your power to just calm down and approach the exam as basically yet another step towards getting your degree. No pressure, I guess that's my method of relaxing. To get the point, your panic would influence you in a very negative way. But fortunately, there are some things you can do to prepare your environment as to basically make you feel as comfortable as possible. So we'll talk about those things in another video. But just remember, take a deep breath, read the problems. If you need to step away from the exam for a moment, assuming it's a take-home exam, and assuming that you can do that, do that. It's not going to help if you just start panicking and reading the exam question again and again and going through your notes. You just need a plan. And one thing, the best thing that can help you with the panic is, aside from preparing the exam environment, to just consistently practice. Find previous year's exams, find some mock exams, find a group of peers and review each other's writing, because once you're familiar with the experience of reading an exam problem, once you know what to expect, it's going to be so much easier. It's the same as going on a very dangerous hike, let's say, or not dangerous, just intimidating. The first time, the surroundings will be entirely unfamiliar, you will get scared, and you might not make it all the way to the top, but then the more often you persist, the more familiar you get with the surroundings, the easier it becomes. I hate this metaphor, but I could not come up with anything else on the fly. I hope that this was useful. I hope it can help you just, calm down on the exam and just remember to discuss only the things which are relevant and only the things which are actually on the exam. So let's wrap it up there, and then in the next video we'll talk a little bit about how to create an environment which is supportive of learning.